This is a production of World Video Bible School. To God be the glory.
Hello and welcome back to this another class on learning to use the Greek New Testament. I hope you've had the opportunity to work on your vocabulary words and to spend some time in translating sentences. It's real important just to remind you that you spend as much time as you can toiling and laboring and working through those sentences and memorizing those words so that learning to read through these sentences and to read in the Bible will be that much more productive for you and that much more enjoyable. But today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to spend some time working on two different chapters of vocabulary words, and then we're going to read from John chapter 1 verses 1 through 10. We'll try to make it to verse 10. We'll just see how time goes and what time will permit. But we just sort of wanted to take a break, work on some vocabulary words, and also to allow you to see some of the fruits of your labor, to see what you are able to do to this point in reading through the text of the Bible. All right, let's begin with the vocabulary words then from chapter 12. Chapter 12. Go ahead and get your book out and turn to page 81 in this edition of the book by David Allen Black. And we'll start on the vocabulary words. The very first one that we see is archo. Archo, which means I rule. Now I want you to say it with me, or after I say it, you say it. Don't forget to do that. I think it's important to hear it and to say it as often as you can. Archo. All right, let's take a look at the next word. Hupakro. Huparcho. All right, there's a rough breathing mark over the upsilon, and then we just simply have archo there. Huparcho, I am, I exist. All right, let's take a look at the next word. The next word is apokrinomai. Apokrinomai, which means I answer. I answer. All right, the next word. Archomai. Archomai, I begin. I begin. The next word, aspadzomai. Aspadzomai means I greet. I greet. And you'll see aspadzomai in several references in the epistles where Paul sends his greetings, and you'll run across that word sometimes. All right, let's take a look at the next word. Bulamai. Bulamai means I wish. I wish. And then a very important word, the word ginomai. Ginomai. That means I become or I am. And you see in parentheses there it says it takes a compliment. And not the kind of compliment necessarily that we might say about someone that we like about them, but sort of the same idea, meaning that ginomai is going to have some sort of object accompanying it. You know, I become what? It needs something to sort of finish that out. And it's sort of like what you'll see in terms of a predicate nominative, and it'll have something in reference to it that complements, as it were, that goes along with that particular verb. You will see it on occasions by itself, and we'll even see an example of it today in John chapter 1, but oftentimes it has a complement. Okay, let's take a look at the next word. Dekomai. Dekomai, which means I receive. I receive. Dekomai. All right, the next word. Ekparuomai. Ekparuomai. Notice the diphthong in there. Ekparuomai. I come out or I go out. All right, the next word. Ergazomai. Ergazomai. You can see the word ergon there for work, but this is, of course, the verb form, I work. All right, the next word. Erchomai. Erchomai, I come. I come or I go. Erchomai. And you need to really put that one in your memory. Notice that its second aorist form down there is aelthon. Aelthon, and that's a word that you need to have in your memory as well. All right, let's take a look at the next word. Here's a great word, euangelizomai. Now remember, when you have the double gammas, you want to give it the NG sound there. You give it the NG sound. So euangelizomai, euangelizomai. I preach the gospel. I bring good news. And you might want to think of course, the word euangelion there. All right, let's take a look at the next word. Logizomai. Logizomai. I consider. I consider. And then the next word. Paruomai. Paruomai. I come or I go. The next word is prosukomai. Prosukomai, which means I pray. Prosukomai. All right, and then the last word is pseudomai. Pseudomai, which means I lie. Now our word pseudonym, our English word pseudonym, comes from that Greek word, and you might remember that a pseudonym is like a pen name. It's a false name that a writer might utilize in reference to a literary piece of work that he didn't want to use his usual name, as in the case here in the United States of Samuel Clemens, who used the pen name or the pseudonym name, or, a pseudonym, and the name was Mark Twain. And there have been a lot of people throughout time who have done that. And also, if you think about the body of literature known as the pseudepigrapha, that had reference to some Old Testament or religious writings that were said to have been written by certain people of old from the Old Testament, and they were false names given. They just gave him those names to maybe lend credibility to them, but no one considers them, of course, canonical or inspired. All right, one other thing that I want to mention now before we move on to the next chapter's vocabulary words, and that is, you probably noticed that on the words that we've just covered, that these are identified as deponent. They're identified as deponent verbs. And normally when we've been working on vocabulary words, like the word echo, the omega ending means I have, or lego, I say. So all of our verb endings to this point, using the present active indicative verb endings, first person singular, with the word I, and that's how we've been learning them in the vocabulary words, all had those omega endings. And now all of a sudden we have a group of verbs that have this my, or this my ending to them. And as we'll explain in the next lesson, these are known as deponent verbs. And the word deponent has reference to verbs whose form looks middle or passive, but in reality they are to be translated in the active voice and not in the passive voice. So they're middle or passive in form, but active in meaning. And so we'll talk about in the next lesson perhaps why that is, or in lessons to come, as we talk about deponent verbs. But for now, just memorize those words as we have just analyzed them and just looked at them on the screen and in your book, just the way they are. So, oh my is a middle or passive ending, first person, singular, for the present tense, that means I. Okay, well that marks the end of those particular words from that chapter. Let's go to the next chapter now of vocabulary words from chapter 13. So turn in your text to chapter 13 and we'll look at a few of the words identified there. Let's take a look now at the first word. The first word, beblemai. Beblemai. Now these are perfect middle passive indicative verbs, and notice on the perfect tense now, you can see up there on the screen with regard to the perfect tense, as we'd mentioned before, that the first letter of the stem of that word is reduplicated. Okay? So actually you have the word balo in there, and when it went to the past, its stem changed, and so you have some letters that drop out, okay, just like they do in English, as we've mentioned before. And then you have your epsilon prefixed to that, and then preceding that is, of course, your reduplication of the first letter of the stem. And so it just simply means I have been thrown. I have been thrown. All right? And the next word is baptismai. Okay? Baptismai. It means I have been baptized. It's the perfect Miller passive indicative. I have been baptized. All right, and you know these words, a lot of them. It's just a matter of seeing them now in a little different form. The next word, you can see the word gnosko in there if you look and realize that there are rules that govern the changes that these words make when they go to the past tense. But nevertheless, if we don't know those rules, we can still begin to sort of make out the word by doing a little detective work on it. And you could see that if you took off epsilon there, that time morph, that you could see the remnants of gnosko. So that is our word there, egnosmai. Egnosmai. All right? And that's the word for I have been known. I have been known. And then the next word, gegramai. Gegramai. Okay? Gegramai. I have been written. I have been written. And then the next word, lelumai. Lelumai. All right? And then the next word, sesosmai. Sesosmai. I have been saved. I have been saved. Okay, that my ending. Notice that my ending. Now, we don't have the variable vowel, the omicron, wedged in between the sigma and the my as we did in the present, but you do have, nevertheless, the my ending. The my ending. All right, the next word is the beginning of our adverbs, and the first one there is achri. Achri, until or up, okay, or to, or up to. And then the next word, eti, eti, for still or yet. And the next word, heos, heos. That's the word for until or up to with the genitive. Then the next word, kathos, kathos, for just, or just as, or for as. Then the next word, kalos, kalos, for rightly or well. All right, and the next word, nun, nun, for now. And then the next word, hapu, 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 meaning where. And then the next word, hate, hate, meaning when. And then the next word, uketi, uketi, for no longer, no longer. All right, the next word, uksi, uksi. Or you might rather should put the accent on the end of that, uksi, uksi. Okay? And then the next word, semeron, semeron, for today. Remember the word hemera for as a cross-reference. And then the next word, tate, tate, for then, for then. And then we have some additional conjunctions. So you'll see the next word now is gar, gar, and that's the word for. And remember, when you see in parentheses that word post-positive out to the side, that just means that that word is never going to stand first place in the sentence. It will always be second or after a noun or so forth, but it often then would get translated or should be translated first in English. For example, in John 3:16, when the Bible says, for God so loved the world, well, gar is not the first word in the Greek sentence. It's actually so loved God. And so anyway, then the next word is dio, dio, meaning therefore, therefore. And then the word, or the particle, a, for or, for or. And then you have next this interesting sort of combination of words, men and de. Men and de. Now those are two separate words. And then you have the ellipsis there, the three dots in between, that have reference to the fact that you're going to put a string of words in there. You'll find that in the text with men and then a string of words and then de. And when you run across that construction, and we'll look at it again on the screen, when you look at that construction, it'll be on the one hand, and on the other hand. Now, you may not see it translated like that, but that's the idea that's being carried across. It's sort of a contrast, okay? On the one hand, this, and then a string of words, and then de, and you would think of it on the other hand with the rest of the words, okay? A string of words that would follow that. So pay attention to that particular structure that may be found in some of those sentences, men and de. All right, the next one. Ude, ude. And that's the combination of u and de, okay? And it means and not, or nor, or not even, okay? Then the next one is similar to what we were talking about a moment ago. When you have ude, ude, okay, ude, ude, then you would see ude and then a string of words and then ude again. And when you see that pattern, when you see that structure, then you would think of neither this and then whatever he's talking about, neither the apostle, and then it might be ude, nor the disciple, or nor the sinner, or something like that. And we'll run across some examples of that later on. The next word is un. Un. And that's the word for therefore or then. Therefore or then. Okay. Well, I know that we've covered a lot of material and a lot of vocabulary words, but the more you use them, the more you work through those cards that we talked about at the beginning of this course, then the better off you'll be. They'll become ingrained in your mind, and after using them over and over again, you'll never forget them. Now, some words you might have to stop and think a little bit, but there are many words that will just stay with you the rest of your life. And so keep working on those. They have huge payoffs in the end and make it so much more enjoyable in learning to use the Greek New Testament. All right, that concludes this portion of the course, today's lesson, dealing with vocabulary. Let's spend just a few moments now doing something maybe a little more exciting and to really show you what you've learned. And let's now go to a translation exercise of the reading of John 1, verses 1 through 10. All right, now let me get in a little different spot here and get a little closer to the board so that you can notice the board and notice also the reading that we're going to work on here in just a moment from John chapter 1. Go ahead and get your copy of the New Testament in Greek if you have it. And if not, go ahead and stop the video at this point and maybe make a copy of it, borrow one from a friend, or whatever you need to do. But I'd like for you to have a copy of, in Greek, John chapter 1, verses 1 through 10, if at all possible. You will also see it on your video screen. But I think it might be good if you got a copy of that at this point and try to read through it on your own, and then maybe turn the video back on, and then we can sort of go through it together as a class. So why don't you do that at this time? Okay, if you've done that, let's go ahead and take a look at John chapter 1 in Greek, and there you see it on the screen. And what I want us to do is I'm going to point to the words, and I'll read them out loud, and then I'll go back and we'll work on a phrase at a time. All right, here we go. En, arche, ein, halagos. All right, now if we just translated that, en is our preposition. Now we haven't learned our capital letters, but I think you can sort of learn them as you go along, and you can see that that is a capital epsilon. And it's just our preposition meaning in. In. In, and then arche is our word for beginning. So literally in beginning. And then here is the past tense of eimi, right? Here is our our perfect active indicative of eimi, meaning was. Okay? So the word, here is the subject of our sentence, nominative case ending, right? Os. Os uo on. Os is masculine singular. So the word was in the beginning. So in the beginning was the Word. Now, remember, we've talked before in here about the fact that, that word order isn't as important in Greek as it is in English. And you've seen just an example of that just now. So realize that you can see that our verb was actually first, and then came the subject of our sentence, where typically in English it's going to be the subject first, then the verb. All right, let's continue reading now. In beginning was the Word. Now we'll go back to Greek. Kai halagos, ein pros ton theon, kai theos ein halagos. Okay? All those are words that you should know from your vocabulary. Here we go. And, okay, so in beginning was the Word, and the Word, and there it is, our past tense, eimi, right, meaning was here, was, pros means with, God, okay, and the pros requires the accusative case ending. So, with God. And the Word, and God, see nominative case ending, was the Word, okay. Now, by the way, just something interesting here while we're looking at this. If you will remember that in the Jehovah's Witness translation of the New Testament, that they translate this verse, that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God. And they say that because there is no definite article in the sentence, let's look back at the sentence now, because there is no definite article before theos, sure enough there isn't, see, went all the way back up here, there's nothing there, I didn't just leave it off, it's not there, okay? And so they say, since there's no definite article, as there is, like in this right here, tom theon, then it should be translated, a God was the Word. But that's not correct. And no translation, English translation, has it that way except the New World Translation. And insofar as I'm aware of, the vast majority, we might be better saying, the vast majority all have it that the Word was God. Not a God, but was God. And the reason for that is because if you'll notice, this is nominative singular, this is nominative singular. What you have in effect is called a predicate nominative. That what's being said here is that the Word is the same thing as God. God is the same thing as the Word. What the Word is, God is. And what God is, the Word is. And we would, in English, make that point by saying, for example, Charlie is the president. And you have a predicate nominative. Charlie is the president. President is the same thing as Charlie. Charlie is the same thing as president. Now, I want you to notice then that we would translate that not as a God, but just simply God. So God was the Word. And then the Jehovah's Witness and the New World Translation is incorrect in their translation of it being a God. Then verse 2. Notice verse 2. Hutos, ein, in, arche, pros, ton, theon. All right. Now, what is that? Do you remember that word? That's a demonstrative pronoun. We just got through learning about that. Hutos. Okay, hutos. So, this one, okay, this one, literally is what that would mean, was, now remember it has an antecedent, right? This is a pronoun, has an antecedent. What's the antecedent? Talking about the Word. There's our subject of our sentence, the Word. Okay. So this one, that is the Word, was in beginning, or in the beginning, with God. Okay, so the Word talking about Jesus. Jesus was there in the beginning with God. Now look at verse 3. Panta, and we haven't learned that word yet, but it means all or every, okay? Or in this case, all things. All things. And then do you remember that? Okay. That's the word, actually the preposition dia. Preposition dia. Now I'm going to go to the board here and show you something. Do you remember that when we saw dia and when it was preceded or followed rather by a word that had a vowel, then what you do is you simply eliminate that and you have an apostrophe there that's telling you that this is dia. Okay, so it is dia. It is dia. All right, well, let's go back to looking at it now. Dia, on verse 3, panta, all things, dia, through, dia means through him, right? Now, we don't translate the preposition of there because you remember that of is a preposition that we supply with those genitive cases. But when it already has a preposition prefixed, or not prefixed to it, but right before it, that's the preposition we use, not the one that we supply. So it's just simply through him, through him. Now let's notice again here, panta dia autou. All right, so through, all things through him, and then here's a word that we have learned, we just learned in the vocabulary. although you may not recognize its form here yet, because we haven't got to the middle passive of everything, but genomai. And it just simply means, because it's past tense, simply means became. So all things through him became. And then here is a preposition I don't believe you've learned yet. And without him, okay, and we don't supply the of there because here's our preposition. And without him became not or nothing. That's one we learned today. Ude. And then this is the word for hen. Hen, not in as in the preposition, but hen as in one or one thing. Okay, it's just an ordinal number, one thing. Okay, and then this is not something we've learned yet, but this is a relative pronoun. It looks just like an article, but the difference is that little accent mark. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's an accent mark that isn't, if you went up to this ha here, that ha there doesn't have an accent mark. It's just an article, and it means thee. But here, this omicron with a breathing mark and an accent mark tells us it's a relative pronoun, okay, meaning which. All right, and then this has reference to become, or has become. Okay, so now you say, well, what in the world does all that mean? All right, let's put it together. All things through him became, and without him, became nothing, or not one thing came, which was made. And so I think some of our English translations basically say this, that all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. But if we gave it a highly literal translation, then it would be all things through him became, and without him, okay, not one thing, okay, here's not one thing. Let me lose my spot here. Not one thing, then, which became into existence, came, all right, without Jesus. Then we go down to verse 4. In auto, zoe, ein, kai, he, zoe, ein, ta, phos, ton, anthropon. All right, now there's the preposition in. So in him, there's our personal pronoun. In him, zoe is life. In him life was. How would we say that in English? In him was life. And the life was ta phos. Remember phos? Phos is the word for, our word photograph comes from that word, phos, meaning light. Graphe, photograph are two Greek words. Phos meaning light, and graphe meaning right, a writing of light. When the light comes through a camera lens and hits the emulsion on that film, it writes an image on that film. It's a writing with light. Okay, so phos means light. All right, let's go back and look now at the verse. Okay, so and life was the light of men. Okay, so in him life was, and the life was the light of men. Verse 5, kai, ta, phos. So, and the light, phos is the word for light, and the light, in te skatia phine. Now, we haven't learned the word skatia yet, but it means darkness. So, and the light in the darkness shined. All right, or actually, phine, shines. I like that. All right, now, remember our endings for the present active indicative. Remember what they are? I'm going to go to the board and write them. O, eis, a, amen, ete, usen. Okay, and there it is. Present active indicative, third person singular. So it, he, she, or it shines. I find that interesting that there's this reference to the light in the darkness, not shine, but still continues to shine. Maybe emphasis upon the continuous nature of it, perhaps. But I think that's interesting that it is in the present tense. So the light in the darkness shined. okay, or shines. All right, now let's go back and continue reading now. Let's take a look at the scripture reference. All right, as we continue now, kai, he, skatia, alta, u, katalaben. Now, the word kai, of course, we know, and the darkness, we just learned that. Alta is a personal pronoun. Neuter, it. Now, sometimes you'll find a pronoun not necessarily agreeing, right, in gender, and but we do have reference to it agreeing to this. So the darkness, it, all right, it not, u is for not, and then kata laben. Now that's an interesting word, kata laben. Now, believe it or not, if you look at it very carefully, there is the word lambano there, lambano, and then there is the word kata, kata. So elaban, which is the past tense form of I took or I received, but now we have this preposition prefix to it, which means kata means down. Okay, kata means down. So it was, if I can go to the board now, it was the word, right? You remember the word lambano, okay, lambano, and then you remember the word kata, okay. So when lambano went to the past, we had this stem change that took place, and then we had to prefix an epsilon on there, and when we did that, okay, we eliminated this, and basically this got on there, and then we put that, but you've got two words in here, kata, and then lambano, and those words have reference to taking down. All right, it could not pull it down, could not pull it down. And there's a whole interesting sort of history behind all of that in terms of even Gnostic beliefs and the struggle between light and darkness, good and evil before the world was created, and somehow that a little bit of the light got imprisoned in the darkness a little bit, and that's what started this creation of the universe and so forth, and how that all happened. And John may very well be referring to the fact that, you know what, darkness could not take it down. That's not how the world got created. It didn't happen by blackness and darkness in this struggle and darkness somehow capturing a little bit of the light. It could not take it down, all right? Now, the King James translation said it could not comprehend it, or some, I think, say apprehend it, and that may convey that better idea there. But literally, it could not take it down, okay? All right, let's go back and continue looking now at our verse. So, back at verse 5, and the light in the darkness shines, and the darkness it not take it down. It could not take it down. Verse 6, agenata, okay, anthropos, apostolamenos, para theou, anima, auto Ioannes. Okay, now look at, back up here at the beginning in verse 6. Agenata is our word for there was. There was, okay, that's a form of genomai. There was a man. There was a man. In this instance, we're going to go ahead and supply our article there. There was a man, okay. And then notice this, apostolamenos. We haven't learned what this is all about. It's a participle, and that we'll come to that later on in this course. But you can, if you look real closely, begin to see the word apostolos, meaning sent, right? Our apostle is one who is sent. And this menos is acting in this instance as participle like a verbal adjective. So it's saying something about anthropos. So it's can literally carry, the highly literal translation would be, there was a man, a having been sent man. Okay? Having been sent man from God. So it comes out in English as there was a man sent from God. Anima, meaning name, and then auto, name to him John. In other words, his name was John. And then notice in verse 7, hutas, Aelthan, Ace, Marturion, Hina, Marturese, Peri, 2, Photos, Hina, Pontes, Pistuosi, Dia, Di, Altu. Okay, so we go back up to verse number 7, and you should recognize that again as our demonstrative pronoun, and talking about this man. This man. What man? Right? Because here it is basically standing alone, isn't it? It's not modifying another noun. It's not modifying another noun in this instance, like demonstrative pronouns can, but this time it stands alone. So this man, but it has an antecedent. What man? John. See, there's our antecedent, John. So this man, he was, okay, this man, Aelthan, he was, I'm sorry, that's Aelthan, he came, rather, he came. I was thinking of Ain, but it's not Ain. This man actually came Ace is for, a witness. He came for a witness, and we would supply a witness. He came for a witness. Hina, meaning that he might witness concerning, pari, concerning to photos, the light. In order that, Hina, he might, or not he might, I'm sorry, in order that all men, Pontes, all men, Pestuosin, might believe, okay, and you can see the sigma there telling us it's future tense, that might believe through him. Okay, then uk, not, all right, and then ain was. Uk, ain, so he was not, and this is ain, remember third person singular, he was not that one or that light. See how this is going to agree. You don't necessarily see it in phos there because we've got a contraction that's taken place, but you can see it there. It's a nominative case. So he was, all right, he was not that light. That, there's our demonstrative pronoun, that. He was not that light, but, okay, and then Hina again, in verse number 8 now, he was not that light, but that he might witness according or concerning the light. Okay, John was not the light, he just came to witness about the light or concerning the light, and that comes out in English in the King James as he was not that light, but was sent to bear witness of that light. All right, now look at verse 9. Ain, okay, and we're familiar with that again. It was the light, all right, the light, the true one. And there you have Aelthan acting as an adjective. See the adjective there? And it's coupled with this. So it's the light, the good light. So the good one, or not the good one, I'm sorry, the true one, okay? So he was the true light. Okay, verse 9, it was the light, the true light, relative pronoun, which lightens, okay, which lightens all men, which lightens all men, or every man, all right, coming, and that's a participle we'll talk about later, coming into the world, coming into eis ton kosmon. Then verse 10, into cosmo, ein kai ha kosmos, dia altu agenita, kai, ha, cosmos, altan, uk, all right, egno. All right, if we put all that together, in the world, he was. He was in the world. Christ was in the world. And the world, okay, and the world through him became. Okay, the world, see cosmos, through him became. And ha, cosmos, the world, all right, him knew not, and the world knew him not. Okay, there's the word for our past tense for knew, for genosko, knew him not. Okay, well, sometimes we're reading through that, sometimes people get a little excited thinking, well, some of those words I didn't quite recognize. And again, when they go to the past tense and when they go to different tenses, sometimes there's stem changes, but if you look real hard, you can begin to see the vestige or what is the form of that word. And if you're not sure, you can always go to an analytical lexicon that will parse it for you and give you the root so that you can then know for sure. But anyway, just wanted at this point to take you through a reading of John chapter 1, verses 1 through 10. And again, there are some words in there and some concepts that we haven't covered yet, but there are a whole lot of other things that we have covered. And just to let you know that you're reading Greek. You're able to see those Greek words. You're able to understand a lot of them and understand its principles. Now, maybe not all of it, but at least you've got a good start. We're all learning, and you'll continue to learn. And I want to encourage you to keep up the good work and to get ready for our next lesson that we'll have that has to do with middle and passive, a very important lesson. So I hope that you've completed your homework as given to you from the last session together. I look forward to seeing you then, and until then, may you have a very wonderful day, and may God bless you richly.